Perfect. All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Janelle Feka. I am one of the consultants on the Guidehouse team that is supporting the South Dakota Department of Education with their elementary and secondary school emergency relief reporting, also known as ESSER. Today we'll be discussing year 4 and talking through what is required as it relates to reporting for the ESSER grants this year. So going into our agenda, I'll give a brief overview of ESSER 1 through 3, the reporting timeline. Then I'll do a deep dive into the actual reporting process and what is required of LEAs this year. I'll give an overview of the workbook overall, as well as the expectations and what is required to be filled out. And then lastly, I'll talk through what's new for year 4 specifically for those of you who have been reporting for the last couple of years, so you're aware of the changes. And then lastly, I'll share some other resources outside of this webinar that you can also use, as well as our contact information if you experience any challenges or difficulties as you work your way through the workbook. So to give an overview of the reporting timeline, you should have received an email April 2nd, noting that the workbooks have been open for you all to take a look at and start working through. They are pre-populated spreadsheets that include information that the state has on each of the LEAs. This workbook is due April 26th and will be closed. So please ensure that you meet this deadline, as it will provide us and the DOE team to review the workbooks to ensure completeness and any questions that might arise as we go through reviewing each workbook. And then lastly, in terms of the actual federal deadline, it's due June 26th. Next, in terms of the reporting process and expectations, as I mentioned, the workbooks were open a few weeks ago. They were sent out to business managers and superintendents, so please ensure that you check your junk or spam folder, as it was sent out through this Guidehouse email here that it's noted down at the bottom. If others outside of the business managers and superintendents need access to the workbook, please reach out and let us know, and we're happy to provide them access. Once you've completed the workbook, on one of the tabs that we'll go through later, it does have a link to email, again, this Guidehouse email, to let us know that you have completed it and is ready for review. Once it's been reviewed, the team will contact any LEAs if there are any discrepancies or questions that might arise while we review it. And then lastly, we'll submit it to the Federal Department of Ed. Next, the actual workbook overview. So the workbook compiles a couple of different tabs. The first one being the cover page, which gives a brief description of the instructions that are needed, as well as a list of tabs that the LEAs are expected to complete. As I've noted, there's ESSER 1 through 3, as well as the cross-act tabs. So there are some LEAs that may not be required to submit all of the tabs. So just be sure to take a look at the cover page to see what you're expected to complete. And as I mentioned previously, there's a direct link in that cover page that will open up your email to email this Guidehouse inbox so that we're aware of when you are completing it. There's a review tab next, which has conditional formatting that will check the inputted data. If any data is incorrect, it will, as noted on the picture to the right-hand side, you'll see it will say false in red text. Otherwise, it will say true if there's no discrepancies or issues. And as well, if there is a discrepancy or a false text box, it notes the item and location of the column. So hopefully it will be easy to identify where the error has occurred and you can work through that. Again, if there's any issues, such as you are aware that the information is correct and you're unsure as to why the text says false, feel free to reach out to us and we can work through that. And then lastly, for the actual reporting itself, there's ESSER 1 through 3 tabs and the cross-act tabs. We'll go through this more in depth, but wanted to just highlight that there are a few changes this year. where you are required to note the expenditures for the different activities. And then in the crosswalk, you'll be required to also input student demographics as well as the number of FTEs that are funded through this grant. Next, we've also tried to make this as seamless as possible for all of you. So we did create a color coding key here. Wanted to highlight essentially the biggest thing for you all to be aware of is that any white cell is information that you are required to input, whether it's false or true, something along those nature. So as you work through it, there may be times where something is gray, noting that the cell is not required, but due to the answer that you provide previously, it may white out because of the fact that you answered something that then requires additional information. So just be on the lookout for any white cells as you are required to input information there. Next, and wanted to provide some important notes on the workbook as well. Please be sure to work on the workbook within the SharePoint link. It's why we provided those links to avoid any errors. Please do not download it. And if you're having any technical difficulties, again, reach out to us and we will definitely work through that. This is just to ensure that there's no issues with duplications or any formatting challenges that might arise if you were to download it. Next, I wanted to highlight the actual reporting period for year 4. This reporting period points out the expenditures reimbursed by the state, specifically from July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. Additionally, please refer to your grants management service system to ensure reimbursements fall within that reporting period. Next, I wanted to highlight some ESSER definitions to ensure that we're all aligned on what the meaning of them were. So for the first one, the LEA mandatory subgrant is the same as LEA formula allocation. And then lastly, the SEA reserve funds, which stands for state level funds reallocation. Next, I wanted to note for summer 2023, please make sure to, for this one, we actually would like for summer 2023 to be included for year 4 reporting period. I know that this might be a little confusing, but in terms of the reporting period, we just want to highlight that you are not required to split up the student demographics. So just report all of summer 2023 in this year's reporting, and then any for 2024 will be for next year. And then lastly, for student participation, students count as participating in an ESSER funded or ESSER partially funded program if they attend 50% or more of the program. Moving on, I want to talk through what's new for ESSER year 4 reporting. So I mentioned some of these previously, but again, want to note more in depth of what they are. So we are required this year to report the expenditures by both accounting object and by activity. Previously, you were only required to provide a true-false response, but this year they are requesting for more details. So again, please utilize the budget detail tab in GMS for any mapping expenditures, as we did try to map them as much as possible to the federal template. However, these codes do not align perfectly, but they are a starting point for you all to work from. So if you have any questions on where to put something specifically, feel free to reach out and or refer to the one-pager that was also sent out, as there is some more detailed guidance on that as well. Next, again, similarly, wanted to highlight the object code here that generally aligns with the object codes you'll see on the top, what the federal version of it is, and then the series code as it relates to the GMS for your reference. Additionally, the expenditure totals for the operational continuity and other allowed uses is the accounting object code expenditure data must equal the expenditure total for the related operational continuity and other allowed uses in the activity category. So essentially the main takeaway here is anything on the left-hand side in terms of totals must equal to the right-hand side in that darker green cells. And then for the level of data and staff detail, we are required to report data on population for both students and staff who've been supported through ESSER-funded activities and interventions. This also includes partially funded activities and interventions. So if any ESSER funds were used for these programs, please be sure to include the counts of those students who were eligible to participate, as well as those who are actually participating in the programs. It does ask for a more broken down student demographic of information, which you'll see within the workbook, as well as the one pager, which again provides more detail on the exact demographics and who falls within those demographics. Next, I also wanted to note, again, we have, as I've mentioned, the workbooks are pre-populated with all of your total expenditures from prior and current reporting periods, as well as the remaining funds for future reporting periods. We've also included staffing counts for each of the LEAs, which is a sum of the PRF, classified, para, and bus driver FTE counts. How we calculated the actual numbers of the allocations is essentially just thinking of following the first in, first out system, in which we do have additional information on for you to reference it within this presentation, which you can review and then reach out if you have additional questions. But if you do notice that there may be some discrepancies on the pre-populated data, please just double check that what you're looking over is within the time frame. Again, that time frame is July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. And then you can also reference the GMS to ensure the expenditure reimbursement dates fall within that reporting period. However, if you do check all of those numbers and there seems to be a discrepancy, please reach out to us and we can work through that data validation process and check in to see and address the issues as needed. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight additional resources. Outside of this webinar, you do have an opportunity to refer to the Department of Education's resources, which includes an even lengthier, more in-depth webinar, as well as their own guidance through each of the various information that they're requesting. And then again, if those don't answer your questions, we're here to support if you need some one-on-one support. So do reach out to us as needed. And with that, I just wanted to leave everyone with our contact information if you have any questions. We look forward to supporting you all in this reporting process. And for those of you who have already submitted your workbooks, we really appreciate your timely response, and we'll reach out if there's any questions on our end. Thanks, everyone.